So you probably didn't wake up this morning thinking, man, I could really use 20 minutes of bizarre dinosaur facts. And yet, here we are. Welcome to the prehistoric rabbit hole you didn't ask for but absolutely need. Now, we all know dinosaurs were big, scary, and allegedly very bad at surviving asteroids. But what if I told you they were also fuzzy, fashion-forward, and sometimes just plain ridiculous? I'm talking about animals with claws longer than swords, meat eaters with arms that make T-Rex look buff, and necks so long they needed industrial plumbing to circulate blood. And no, this isn't going to be another T-Rex was a predator kind of show. We're digging deeper, like literal fossil layers deeper. These are the facts they didn't teach you in school because, well, some of them sound made up, but they're not. Paleontologists actually found this stuff in rocks and said, yeah, that tracks. So grab your metaphorical chisel, because it's time to crack open the weird, violent, feathery mess that is dinosaur science. You'll laugh, you'll gasp, you'll probably reevaluate chickens. Let's go. Let's get something out of the way. Jurassic Park lied to you. I know, cinematic betrayal hurts. But those sleek, scaly raptors, they were probably rocking a full coat of feathers. Yep. Dinosaurs, the supposed kings of cold-blooded brutality, were more Big Bird than Godzilla. Let's start with Velociraptor, a name that basically means swift thief, which sounds cool until you realize it was only about the size of a turkey. A turkey with claws. And feathers. Fossils discovered in Mongolia, like the infamous Velociraptor mongoliensis, clearly show quill knobs on the forearms, which are little bumps where feathers anchored in. That's the fossil record politely screaming, "This thing had wings, you guys." And then there's Microraptor. Oh boy. This guy looked like a cross between a crow, a lizard, and something a 5-year-old might draw on a sugar high. It had feathers on its arms, legs, and even its tail, like some kind of prehistoric kite. Scientists believe it could glide between trees, which is adorable until you remember it was also a predator. Imagine a fluffy, four-winged ninja bird silently descending from a tree to ruin a small mammal's entire afternoon. Nature. Elegant and horrifying. The idea that dinosaurs were feathered isn't some fringe theory anymore. Over 50 species have been discovered with preserved feathers or proto-feathers, from tiny theropods like Sinosauropteryx, which had a dapper little raccoon-striped tail, to larger guys like Eutyrannus, a tyrannosaur relative the size of a bus, that was also covered in feathers. Because nothing says nightmare fuel like a shaggy death lizard stomping toward you like a giant angry emu. Now, were all dinosaurs feathered? No. Sauropods like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus probably weren't waddling around in feather boas. But plenty of the two-legged meat-eaters, the theropods, definitely had plumage. And they weren't just for flying. Feathers served all kinds of weird purposes. Insulation, camouflage, display, intimidation, and probably even mating rituals. Because of course the prehistoric dating scene required flair. Imagine being a female Anchiornis, chilling on a branch, and some male comes strutting in with his freshly molted tail feathers, flaring them out like a Vegas showgirl. No roar, no muscles, just a sick feather fan. Evolution works in mysterious and occasionally hilarious ways. Also, let's take a moment to mourn all the artists who spent decades painting dinosaurs as reptilian lizards with crocodile skin, only to find out they were basically angry parrots. Somewhere, an entire generation of textbook illustrators is still crying into their pencils. And while we're here, remember those terrifying raptor kitchen scenes in Jurassic Park? Now picture the same chase scene, but with the raptors covered in glossy feathers. Maybe even iridescent ones. It kind of turns the whole thing into a bizarre goose on steroids situation. Slightly less scary? Maybe. But scientifically accurate? Absolutely. So next time someone tells you dinosaurs were just scaly dragons, feel free to hit them with a smug, "actually," and show them a picture of Microraptor. Because prehistoric creatures weren't just brutal, some of them were downright fabulous. Alright, let's talk about the big guy, Tyrannosaurus rex. The apex predator, the poster child of prehistoric doom, the one dinosaur even your grandma knows by name. But the T-Rex you think you know? Yeah, that one's only half the story. Because the real T-Rex wasn't just a Hollywood monster. It was a strangely built, overpowered, underarmed freak of nature with a bite that could turn bones into powder and a snout that was weirdly emotional. Let's start with its mouth, because that's where the murder happened. T-Rex didn't just bite stuff, it obliterated it. Its bite force has been estimated at around 12,000 pounds. which is basically like getting your leg stuck in a trash compactor while a truck parks on your chest. Fossils of Triceratops bones have been found with crushed marrow cavities, meaning T-Rex didn't just kill, it recycled. Efficient, horrifying, eco-friendly, and then there's its teeth. Not daggers, but thick, banana-shaped murder tools. Serrated like steak knives, designed not just to pierce, but to tear and mash. Some were over 12 inches long. They didn't break, they grew back, constantly. So it was a never-ending tooth factory of destruction. Basically, the dental plan was, why fix it when we can just replace the whole thing? Now, let's address the arms. Everyone loves to make fun of T-Rex for its dinky little forelimbs. Fair. They were about the length of a human toddler's. But here's the kicker. They were stupidly strong. Each arm could curl over 400 pounds. They weren't useless, they were just selectively useful. Some paleontologists think they might have been used for gripping prey during mating, getting up from a nap, which honestly, relatable, or holding prey still while it chomped down. Think of them like utility hooks attached to a living demolition machine. And speaking of weird features, let's talk about the face, specifically the snout. For years, everyone assumed it was just a big, scaly nose. But turns out, the front of T-Rex's face was covered in something called foramina, tiny little holes for nerves. That means the snout was packed with sensors, kind of like a crocodile's. It could feel its way around a kill with insane precision, which is kind of weird when you realize this 40-foot murder chicken had a face sensitive enough to nuzzle eggs or detect subtle vibrations. It's like putting a tactile touchscreen on a bulldozer. Why? Because evolution apparently enjoys a challenge. Vision? Excellent. T-Rex had binocular vision, giving it depth perception good enough to thread a needle. Or, pick out which part of your ribcage looked most snackable. Smell? Top tier. Olfactory bulbs bigger than your cat. It could smell you from miles away, and it wouldn't be looking for hugs. Basically, it had all the senses of a bloodhound jammed into a predator that could outrun a jeep in short bursts. And yeah, it could run. Not fast by cheetah standards, but don't underestimate a multi-ton monster hitting 12 to 20 miles per hour. That's fast enough to ruin your whole week if you're a duck-billed hadrosaur with a bad knee. Despite its terrifying profile, T-Rex might have also been a bit of a scavenger. Some scientists argue it was like the world's most terrifying vulture, sniffing out carcasses and muscling weaker predators out of the way. Others insist it hunted actively. Most likely, it did both. Because when you're 9 tons of nightmare with bone-crushing jaws, you don't need a strict diet plan. You just eat what's available. Apex privilege. And don't forget, there's evidence that juvenile T-Rexes were fast, leggy hunters that filled a different ecological niche before growing into their final form. So it was basically a murder machine in training, like a raptor going through a bulking phase. So yeah, the real T-Rex wasn't just a lumbering Hollywood monster. It was a highly evolved, sense-enhanced, bone-munching apex freak. A weird combo of brute force, surprising sensitivity, and awkwardly tiny arms. Kind of like a bodybuilder who cries during sad commercials. Let's take a break from all the claws and carnage to talk about the giants. The skyscrapers with legs, the dinosaurs that made trees nervous. Sauropods. These long-necked titans didn't just win the size contest. They threw the scale out the window and called it a lifestyle. And their necks? Absolute overkill in the best way. Start with Argentinosaurus. Discovered in, surprise, Argentina, this guy was estimated to weigh around 100 tons. That's about 14 African elephants stacked into one ridiculously large reptile. It could stretch over 100 feet long, with a neck that probably needed its own zip code. And this wasn't just a fluke. There were many sauropods with absurd dimensions. Patagotitan, Dreadnoughtus, Supersaurus. Yes, that's a real name. Because paleontologists have fun too. Now those necks. You'd think they evolved to reach high trees, but it's not quite that simple. Sure, munching on leaves 20 feet off the ground was a nice perk, but many researchers think the real advantage was range without movement. Imagine being able to eat from a 30-foot buffet while standing still. Efficient, right? Minimal effort, maximum foliage. The structure of these necks was wild. We're talking 15 vertebrae, each hollowed out like bird bones to stay light. Some were over 3 feet long individually. Their vertebrae were like Swiss cheese, strong on the outside, full of air pockets on the inside. Think of it as the dinosaur version of aerospace engineering. Because when you're carrying 30 feet of neck, you don't want it to be solid concrete. But here's the real kicker: blood flow. Getting blood up that high was a physiological nightmare. Sauropods needed monstrously powerful hearts, possibly multiple hearts, or at the very least, a heart the size of a hot tub. One theory even suggests they had a series of valves and pressure chambers in their neck arteries, kind of like a giraffe's vascular system but supercharged. Also, they didn't faint every time they tried to nibble a leaf. And it's not just the height that was impressive. Mamenchisaurus had a neck that was more than half its total body length. That's like if your neck was the size of a stretch limo. It didn't even need to stand up tall. It could swing that thing around like a living crane arm, vacuuming up leaves in a lazy arc while the rest of its body just chilled. Weirdly, some sauropods may not have even held their necks high most of the time. Biomechanics suggests many carried them horizontally, sweeping side to side like giant weed whackers. So that romantic image of a sauropod rearing up to grab the highest branch might have been more of a once-in-a-while thing, like the dinosaur version of stretching after a nap. Let's also take a moment to appreciate their sheer weirdness. These were animals that had tiny heads, some the size of a horse's, sitting at the end of a neck longer than a school bus. And inside that little head, a brain the size of a grapefruit. Not exactly running Windows 11, but when your whole job is walk slowly, eat constantly, who needs brains? And despite their size, sauropods weren't invincible. Fossils show evidence of predator attacks, especially on the young or sick. A full-grown titanosaur might have been too much trouble, but a juvenile, prime target. Paleopathologists have found healed bite marks and broken bones, signs that even these gentle giants occasionally had bad days. Like, someone tried to eat your tail kind of bad. Still, they were among the most successful dinosaur groups ever. They roamed from the Jurassic to the end of the Cretaceous, across every continent, including Antarctica, when it was warmer, obviously. Some herded together, some traveled solo, some might have even migrated. These weren't just massive, they were mobile. In short, sauropods were walking engineering marvels. Evolution looked at the humble lizard and said, let's make it tall, heavy, and give it a neck longer than most cars. Oh, and it still has to function. And somehow, it worked. Okay, so we've covered the fashionistas, the bone crushers, and the giraffe impersonators. But now it's time to talk about the freaks. The stuff that crawled out of the prehistoric design department after someone spiked the evolutionary punch. Because some dinosaurs weren't majestic or terrifying in the usual way. They were straight up nightmare fuel. And not in a wow, what a powerful predator way. More like, why does that thing exist? Let's begin with Therizinosaurus. Picture a sloth. Now make it 30 feet tall. Now give it scythe-like claws that were over 3 feet long, the longest claws of any land animal ever. This thing looked like Freddy Krueger cosplaying as a chicken. And the best part? It was probably a herbivore. Yeah, all that nightmare hardware, and it likely just used those claws to pull down branches or rake up ferns like a prehistoric salad bar, which somehow makes it more disturbing. Like, I could shred you into pasta, but I choose kale. Thanks, I hate it. Next up, Carnotaurus. Literal translation? Meat bull. And it earned that name. This thing had a bulldog-like face, 2 stubby horns over its eyes, and arms so short they made T-Rex look like it had wings. It was fast, probably one of the faster large theropods, and it had this weird, almost reptilian grin fossilized into its skull. Scientists think its jaws were adapted for quick strikes, shaking its prey like a dog toy. Its skull? Thick and reinforced, maybe for headbutting or intimidation. Basically, it was the dinosaur version of a rugby player who skipped arm day, forever. And then there's Mononychus, which sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, but was actually a real animal. This guy was about the size of a turkey, covered in feathers, and had one single claw on each tiny arm. Just one. Scientists think it was for digging into termite mounds, but we're not ruling out prehistoric backscratcher just yet. It looked like someone built a dinosaur in a hurry and just gave up halfway through. One claw. Done. Ship it. Stygimoloch deserves a mention too. This thing had a thick, dome-shaped skull, surrounded by a ring of spikes. Kind of like if a punk rocker mated with a bowling ball. It's part of the Pachycephalosauridae family, which is a fancy way of saying head-butting weirdos. Paleontologists are still debating whether Stygimoloch was its own species or just the teenage phase of Pachycephalosaurus, which, if true, means it was literally going through a spiky goth phase. Incredible. And let's not forget Anzu Wiley, affectionately nicknamed the Chicken from Hell. This was a 10-foot tall feathered dinosaur with a beak, claws, and a crest on its head. Kind of like a demonic cassowary that could rip your face off. It lived in North America, and the fossils suggest it was omnivorous, which means it probably ate plants, meat, and anything it could catch, including your will to sleep at night. Then there's Bajatosaurus, a sauropod relative. But instead of being content with a long neck, it decided to grow spikes out of its neck that curved forward, like it was trying to impale anything that tried to take a bite out of its face. Imagine being a predator and realizing your dinner is armed with backward neck blades. That's not just overkill, that's prehistoric passive aggressiveness. These bizarre creatures weren't evolutionary accidents. They thrived. They adapted. Some were armored, some were fast, and some looked like rejected Star Wars creatures. But they all carved out niches in their ecosystems. And that's what makes dinosaurs so fascinating. They weren't just big lizards. They were feathered, clawed, horned, spiked, one-clawed, bald, rainbow-feathered, nightmare-fueled, biological fever dreams. So yeah, next time someone tells you dinosaurs were all cool and majestic, please introduce them to the three-clawed salad murderer and the chicken from hell. Because prehistoric Earth wasn't just dangerous, it was weird. So here's the part where most dinosaur documentaries roll the sad music and cue the asteroid. You know the story. Massive rock from space crashes into Earth, everything explodes, dinosaurs scream, cut to black. Tragic, right? Well, sure, if you're thinking about the big toothy ones. But here's the twist most people forget. Dinosaurs didn't actually go extinct. They just reinvented themselves with feathers. Let's rewind to the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago. Things are going great for dinosaurs. T-Rex is terrorizing everything, sauropods are mowing down forests like leafy buffets, and duck-billed hadrosaurs are out here just vibing. Then, boom, literally. A 6-mile-wide asteroid slams into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact releases energy equivalent to 1 billion nuclear bombs, vaporizes everything for miles, and kicks up enough dust to block out the sun. Not ideal. If you're cold-blooded, plant-dependent, or just unlucky, you're toast. Or, more accurately, you're part of the extinction event that wiped out around 75% of all species on Earth. But here's where it gets interesting. While the big guys went down in fiery glory, a small group of dinosaurs quietly survived. These were the ones with feathers, hollow bones, warm-blooded metabolism, and, crucially, wings. We're talking about avian theropods, the OG birds. That little sparrow eyeing your sandwich at lunch? Technically, that's a dinosaur. So is your backyard pigeon. Even the smug-looking parrot screaming obscenities in your living room. All dinosaurs. The link between birds and dinosaurs isn't just a theory. It's rock-solid fossil science. Specimens like Archaeopteryx show the clear transition. Teeth in the beak, claws on the wings, long tail with vertebrae, and yes, feathers. It had more in common with a velociraptor than a modern bird. Other fossils like Anchiornis and Confuciusornis add even more layers to this weird evolutionary glow-up. And then there's Ichthyornis, a seabird from the Cretaceous with a beak and teeth. So yeah, nightmare pelican was real. And it's not just about feathers. Birds share tons of features with theropod dinosaurs. Hollow bones, a similar hip structure, nesting behavior, even air sacs connected to the lungs. Some theropods even brooded their eggs like modern birds. Picture a feathered oviraptor curled around a nest, looking all cozy and maternal, while its cousins were out trying to eat ceratopsians. What's wild is how close the asteroid came to wiping out this whole group too. Most bird lineages actually did go extinct in the impact aftermath, but a few managed to survive, probably because they were small, could fly, ate a varied diet, and nested on the ground instead of trees, which were all on fire. From that handful of lucky feathery survivors, we get 10,000 modern bird species. From flamingos to penguins to chickens. All technically dinosaurs. Which means the next time you see a seagull steal someone's French fries, that's 66 million years of attitude right there. And yet, somehow, we still draw dinosaurs as green, scaly lizards. Old habits die hard. Even though the science is clear, pop culture just can't quit the lizard look. Hollywood gave us raptors without feathers because they wanted sleek and scary, not scientifically accurate murder turkeys. But science marches on, and the fossils keep coming. Some even preserve pigment structures, letting us guess at dino color patterns. Spoiler, some of them had stripes, iridescence, even spots. They didn't just survive, they showed up looking good. So yeah, the asteroid ended an era, but it didn't finish the job. Dinosaurs are still here, They just shrank, adapted, and learned how to sing, swim, and occasionally poop on your windshield. Evolution didn't delete them, it rebranded them. And the next time you look at a bird and think, meh, not impressive, just remember, that fluffy little cardinal is the final form of 150 million years of predatory perfection. Respect the beak. And if all these carefully collected facts didn't make you look at pigeons with a little more fear and respect, rewind and watch it again.